Pick up the rag. Clean it up. The manager's voice slices through the bustling airport terminal, her words dripping with disdain as she glares at the black barista. This young woman, a linguistics scholar relegated to pouring coffee, endures daily slights, ignored job applications, racial barbs masked as critiques, and a workplace that dismisses her fluency in 6 languages. Her talents are buried beneath a uniform, her potential reduced to wiping caramel stains while colleagues sneer and passengers overlook her. Yet within this injustice lies a spark. Her voice, sharp and unyielding, waits to break free. What happens when the world finally hears her? Stay with us to uncover a story of resilience that redefines recognition. Subscribe to our channel for the latest stories and share where you're listening from in the comments. Don't miss a moment. This journey will surprise you. The terminal hummed with the restless pulse of dawn, a symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and the sharp hiss of espresso machines. At the coffee counter near Gate 19, Peggy Nkosi, a 28-year-old black woman, moved with quiet precision. Her apron, stained faintly with coffee grounds, hung over a frame that carried 6 years of unseen labor. She wiped a caramel smudge from the counter, her fingers tracing the spot as if it held a secret. Her eyes, dark and steady, flickered with a fleeting sadness as her manager, Brigitte Duval, a middle-aged American woman with a pinched smile, loomed nearby. "Don't let customers think we hire sloppy help," Brigitte snapped, her voice low but cutting, her gaze lingering on Peggy's braids with a disdain that felt heavier than the words. The caramel stain, small as it was, seemed to Peggy a symbol of her talents, brilliant, yet treated as something to be scrubbed away. Peggy had once been a star at Howard University, an honors student in linguistics with dreams of diplomacy. Her professors had praised her fluency in 6 languages: English, French, Arabic, Spanish, Swahili, and Italian, envisioning her bridging nations. But a phone call had changed everything. Her younger sister, injured in a car accident, needed care that their small family couldn't provide. With their mother gone and no one else to step in, Peggy left her scholarship behind, trading embassies for aprons, lecture halls for airport terminals. 6 years later, her applications to the airport's language department, 12 in total, sat buried in a drawer, ignored without explanation. She knew why, though the truth was never spoken aloud. Her skin, her presence, and her ambition didn't fit the image the airport wanted to project. The morning rush surged, a blur of impatient faces and hurried orders. A white businessman, Bluetooth earpiece blinking, barked, "Grande latte, quick," without looking up from his phone. To him, Peggy was scenery, a function of the terminal, not a person. She poured the milk, steamed it to a perfect froth, and slid the cup across the counter. He grabbed it and left, no acknowledgement, no glance. Another customer, another order, another moment of invisibility. Peggy noticed everything, though, details others missed. The toddler tugging at his mother's sleeve, ignored. The elderly man struggling with his boarding pass, dismissed by a security guard too busy flirting with a receptionist. And the way her presence, her blackness, seemed to unsettle those around her, as if her competence was an affront. Brigitte strutted behind the counter, her heels clicking like a metronome of authority. A single coffee bean on the floor caught her eye, and she pointed with a manicured finger. "Mr. Spot," she said, her tone implying more than a cleaning oversight. Peggy knelt to wipe it, her jaw tight. The reprimand wasn't about the bean, it was about keeping her in place, reminding her she was less. "Stand straighter," Brigitte added, leaning close enough for Peggy to smell her sharp perfume. "You don't want people thinking we hire lazy workers, do you?" The word lazy landed like a coded jab, a reminder of stereotypes Peggy had spent years disproving. She straightened, not out of compliance, but to hold her ground, her silence a shield against the sting. Across the counter, Tina, a young white co-worker with a practiced smile, chatted lightly with a customer, her work sloppy but unchallenged. Brigitte praised her for brightening the mood, though Tina had forgotten to restock the sugar packets Peggy now quietly replenished. Tina's carelessness was forgiven, even celebrated, while Peggy's every move was scrutinized. Once, when Peggy had offered to translate for a confused Spanish-speaking passenger, Tina had laughed, whispering to another co-worker, "She's just showing off. Stick to coffee." Brigitte had overheard but said nothing, her silence a tacit agreement. The unfairness burned, not because Peggy craved praise, but because she knew her skills, her languages, her degree, her precision deserved more than this counter. Peggy's hands moved mechanically, grinding beans, wiping spills, serving faces that never saw her. She remembered her last application to the language department, submitted 4 years ago, after months of perfecting her cover letter. The response had been a single line. Not a cultural fit. No feedback, no interview, just a door slammed shut. She had kept applying, each rejection a heavier weight, each one signed by Brigitte or a faceless HR manager. Her dreams of diplomacy hadn't died, but they had been forced into hibernation, tucked away like her degree in a locked drawer at home. The terminal's noise swelled. Announcements, footsteps, the clatter of trays. Peggy's eyes scanned the crowd, catching the subtle dismissals. A passenger's glance that skipped over her, a co-worker's smirk when she adjusted her apron. She was invisible, yet hyper-visible, her blackness a target for judgment. Brigitte lingered nearby, clipboard in hand, watching Peggy with the intensity of someone waiting for a mistake. "Know your place," Brigitte had said once, when Peggy had dared to linger near the VIP lounge, hoping to overhear a multilingual announcement. The words echoed now as Peggy poured another coffee, her hands steady but her heart heavy with the weight of being unseen. Yet, beneath the apron, Peggy carried a fire. Her languages were not just words. They were her rebellion, her proof of worth in a world that refused to see it. She whispered a French phrase to herself, "Je vous en prie," a quiet mantra of resilience. The terminal might not know her, but she knew herself, her mind, her skills, her story. And somewhere, deep within, she sensed that this counter, this moment, was not her end. A reckoning was coming, one that would force the world to hear her voice. For now, she wiped the counter clean, but the caramel stain was gone, and so was her willingness to stay silent forever. The caramel stain was gone, but Peggy and Kosi's resolve lingered, a quiet fire beneath her steady hands. As she poured another coffee, the terminal's morning rush swelled, a cacophony of hurried footsteps and overlapping voices. It was 7:13 a.m., and the air buzzed with the urgency of departures. Peggy's eyes scanned the crowd, catching the fleeting glances that never settled on her. But then a sharp cry cut through the noise, a woman's voice, trembling with panic. Peggy turned, her instincts sharper than the espresso machine's hiss, and saw her, Mariam, an American of Arab descent, clutching her boarding pass, tears streaming down her face. Her words tumbled out in rapid Arabic, unintelligible to the flustered white receptionist at the counter who repeated, "I don't understand you," her hands raised in helpless frustration. Mariam's distress was palpable, her voice breaking as she explained in broken English that her lost luggage held family heirlooms, irreplaceable photos, a grandmother's scarf, a child's drawing. The receptionist, out of her depth, glanced around for help, but the other staff shrank back, unwilling to engage. Peggy didn't hesitate. She stepped from behind the counter, her apron still tied, and approached Mariam with a calm that belied the chaos around them. "I can help," she said softly in English, then switched to Arabic, her voice a smooth, reassuring cadence. The words flowed like a river, precise and warm, as she asked Mariam to describe the bag and pinpoint where it was last seen. Mariam's eyes widened, relief washing over her as she poured out her story, her hands gesturing wildly. Peggy listened, nodding, her focus unbroken despite the terminal's clamor. She relayed Mariam's words to the airline staff, her Arabic flawless, her tone commanding, yet kind. Within minutes, she had coordinated with a gate agent to track the bag, using a radio to bypass the receptionist's confusion. The solution was simple: a misrouted tag, a quick call to baggage claim, but Peggy's intervention was extraordinary. When the agent confirmed the bag would be retrieved, Mariam grabbed Peggy's hands, her tears now of gratitude. "God bless you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Peggy smiled, her response instinctive. "Je vous en prie," she said in French, a gentle flourish of courtesy. Mariam's grip tightened, as if holding on to a lifeline, before she was escorted away by a relieved flight attendant. The moment should have been a quiet victory, but it wasn't. As Peggy returned to her counter, Brigitte Duval, her manager, stood waiting, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. "You left your post," Brigitte barked, her voice sharp enough to draw glances from nearby passengers. "This isn't your job." A white businessman in line nodded approvingly at Brigitte's reprimand, as if Peggy's initiative was an overstep. Another passenger, overhearing, praised Peggy. "That was impressive," but Brigitte cut him off. "She's here to serve coffee, not play translator," she said, her tone laced with a subtle venom that implied Peggy's skills were an anomaly, suspicious even, for a black barista. The passenger faltered, retreating, and Peggy's jaw tightened, her silence a shield against the sting. From a leather seat near the gate, Mason Taylor, a 31-year-old American documentary filmmaker, watched the scene unfold. His coffee had gone cold in his hand, forgotten as he leaned forward, his sharp eyes fixed on Peggy. 12 years ago, in a chaotic Paris train station, a teenage black girl had saved him, a lost college student with her fluent French and a calm "Je vous en prie." Her voice, confident, clear, had stayed with him, a beacon in his memory. Now, hearing it again, Mason felt a jolt of recognition. The same phrasing, the same effortless shift between languages, the same quiet strength. He adjusted his glasses, his mind racing. Peggy didn't notice him, her focus back on the espresso machine, but Mason's gaze lingered, his documentary project, Invisible Voices, suddenly finding its heart. Behind the counter, Tina, a young white co-worker, leaned toward a white security guard, her voice low but pointed. "She's always trying to stand out," Tina whispered, her smile sharp as she nodded toward Peggy. "Speaking Arabic like that? It's too much." The guard smirked, his eyes sliding past Peggy as if she were invisible, his nod a silent agreement with Tina's judgment. The implication hung heavy. A black woman wielding such linguistic skill was unnatural, disruptive. Brigitte, catching the exchange, didn't intervene, her silence a tacit endorsement. Her glance at Peggy, as she spoke Arabic, carried a flicker of suspicion, as if the language itself was a threat when it came from her. Peggy felt the weight of their stares, but kept her hands steady, steaming milk with mechanical precision. She had grown used to this, the subtle jabs, the assumptions that her competence was an overreach. A passenger, a white woman with a tourist badge, hesitated before ordering, her eyes darting to Peggy's braids, then away as if questioning her place behind the counter. Peggy served her with a practiced smile, but the interaction stung, a reminder of how her blackness made her both invisible and hypervisible. Her skills a curiosity rather than a credential. Mason stood, his phone still in hand, his documentary notes forgotten. He watched Peggy wipe the counter, her movements deliberate, her face composed, but her eyes betraying a quiet defiance. He remembered the Paris station, the way her voice had cut through his panic, guiding him to safety. Now she was guiding others, unnoticed by most, dismissed by those who should have seen her worth. He stepped closer to the gate, his decision forming. This was no ordinary barista, and her story was one the world needed to hear. This was no ordinary barista, Mason Taylor thought, stepping closer to the gate, his decision crystallizing. Her story demanded to be told. But the terminal's restless pulse had other plans. By mid-morning, the air at Gate 19 thickened with tension, the hum of voices now laced with whispers. Peggy Nkosi, still reeling from her quiet triumph with Miriam, returned to her counter, unaware that envy had already set a trap. Tina, her young white co-worker, watched her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her fingers lingering near a crate of flavored syrups. As Peggy served a customer, Tina's hand nudged a bottle of hazelnut syrup, sending it crashing onto a white businessman's $900 leather duffel bag. The sticky liquid splattered across the marble floor, the bag, and Peggy's apron. The businessman gasped, his face reddening with fury. "She did it!" Tina exclaimed, her voice loud enough to draw a crowd. She pointed at Peggy, who froze, a cleaning rag in hand. "I'm so sorry, sir," Peggy said, kneeling to wipe the mess, her voice calm but her heart pounding. The businessman, ignoring her apology, pulled out his phone and began filming, zooming in on Peggy's hands, her braids, her stained apron. "This is unacceptable," he shouted, his lens capturing her every move. Tina leaned toward a nearby passenger, her tone conspiratorial. "She's been acting off all morning, probably because of that video." The word video hung in the air like a spark, igniting curiosity among the onlookers. Unbeknownst to Peggy, a 38-second clip had surfaced online at 2 a.m., posted by an anonymous account. It was a malicious edit of her interaction with Miriam, her Arabic words stripped of context, overlaid with fake subtitles, "Move or I'll call security." The title, "Barista Assaults Family," framed her as aggressive, even radicalized. The clip, layered with ominous music, spread like wildfire. 20,000 views in hours, shared across travel blogs and social media. Comments flooded in. "Another angry black woman. She's faking that language stuff." The distortion weaponized her skin and her fluency, turning her act of compassion into a caricature of threat. Yet, buried in the vitriol, a few voices questioned, "A barista fluent in 6 languages?" Brigitte Duval, Peggy's manager, seized the moment. Striding to the counter, her heels clicking with menace, she fixed Peggy with a glare. "You think you're special," she hissed, loud enough for the gathered passengers to hear. "You're just a coffee girl." The words landed like a slap, each syllable dripping with disdain that went beyond the spill. A white woman in line whispered to her companion, "I knew it. People like her always stir up trouble." The comment, casual but cutting, echoed the video's narrative, pegging Peggy's blackness as a problem. Brigitte, relishing the crowd's attention, pointed to the floor. "Pick up that rag and clean the bathrooms." Now. Her order was a public shaming, a punishment for daring to shine. Peggy's throat tightened, but she complied, her movements deliberate as she gathered cleaning supplies. The terminal's eyes followed her, some curious, some judgmental, none defending her. A white security guard, who had nodded at Tina's earlier gossip, stood by, his silence complicit. Another staff member, a white cashier, averted her gaze, unwilling to challenge Brigitte's authority. The unfairness burned, not just in the accusation, but in the ease with which it was believed. Peggy's skills, her degree from Howard, her years of quiet competence, were irrelevant in the face of a narrative that painted her as a threat. The video's lies had given Brigitte and Tina the perfect excuse to push her further into the shadows. As Peggy walked toward the employee restrooms, mop in hand, the weight of the morning pressed against her chest. She had faced slights before, Brigitte's coded jabs, Tina's smirks, but this was different. The video had twisted her voice, her help, into something sinister, and the terminal had swallowed it whole. Yet, amidst the cruelty, a flicker of something else emerged. Online, beyond the hate, comments began to shift. 6 languages. Who is this woman? One user wrote. Another. Why is a linguist working a coffee counter? The clip, meant to destroy her, had inadvertently cast a spotlight on her talents, catching the attention of viewers far beyond the airport. Peggy pushed open the restroom door, the ammonia scent sharp in her nose. She scrubbed the tiles, her hands steady but her mind racing. The humiliation stung, but it wasn't new. What was new was the world noticing her, even if for the wrong reasons. She thought of Mariam's gratitude, the way her Arabic had built a bridge where none existed. That was her truth, not the lies on some stranger's phone. As she rinsed the mop, a janitor, an older black man with salt and pepper hair, passed by, his eyes meeting hers. "They're scared of you," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of his own unseen years. "Keep going." His words, brief but heavy, anchored her, a reminder that her fire still burned. The janitor's words, "Keep going," echoed in Peggy and Kosi's mind as she scrubbed the restroom tiles, her hands steady despite the sting of humiliation. In the dim storage room, the air heavy with ammonia, Peggy sat on an overturned bucket, her phone glowing with the 12th rejection email from the airport's language department. Not a cultural fit. The phrase, cold and vague, was a familiar wound, each word a reminder of years spent unseen. Her fingers hovered over the screen, tracing the rejection's sharp edges, when a shadow fell across the doorway. Mason Taylor, the filmmaker, stood there, his presence calm but deliberate, his eyes carrying a weight that made Peggy pause. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "For 12 years. Mason's memory unfolded like a reel. A chaotic Paris train station, a 16-year-old black girl with steady eyes guiding a panicked American student through a maze of platforms. Her French, flawless and confident, had ended with a gentle "Je vous en prie," a phrase that anchored him. "That was you," he said, stepping closer. "And now you're here, still saving people." Peggy's breath caught, the past colliding with the present. He offered her a role in his documentary series, Invisible Voices, not as a subject but as a co-creator, a chance to amplify the stories of overlooked workers like her. Doubt flickered in her chest. Years of rejections had taught her to question her worth, but Mason's conviction held her gaze. "You're not just a story," he said. "You're the voice that tells it." Peggy hesitated, the weight of her buried dreams pressing against her. The storage room, with its cracked tiles and flickering light, felt like a metaphor for her life. Confined, dismissed. She thought of her sister, the reason she'd traded diplomacy for this apron, and the countless applications that vanished into silence. Mason handed her a slim folder, its pages outlining a vision where her languages could reshape narratives. "Think about it," he said, leaving her alone with the possibility. Peggy clutched the folder, her fingers trembling, not with fear but with the faint stir of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Days later, Peggy stepped into a sleek conference room, the terminal's noise a distant hum. The documentary team sat around a polished table, their eyes scanning her. Some curious, others skeptical. Celeste, a white producer and Mason's ex, leaned back, her smile sharp as glass. "So, this is the Barista," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Whispers followed, laced with rumors. Peggy was a dropout, a scandalmonger riding the viral video's wave. The room's air tightened, the skepticism a subtle echo of the terminal's judgment, where her blackness and ambition were seen as threats. Celeste's words carried a coded jab. "I'm sure your unique background will add color to the project." The pause before unique lingered, implying Peggy's qualifications were suspect, her presence an anomaly. Peggy didn't flinch. She placed a leather binder on the table, its weight a quiet challenge. "My background," she said, her voice steady, "includes a degree from Howard University, certifications in 6 languages, and 2 peer-reviewed articles on cross-cultural communication." She opened the binder, revealing transcripts, certificates, and publication records, each page a testament to her silenced potential. "My 6 languages," she continued, meeting Celeste's gaze, "have never been quiet." The room stilled, the skepticism faltering. Mason leaned forward, his voice firm. "She's the heart of this film. We move forward with her." Celeste's smile tightened, her attempt to undermine Peggy unraveling in the face of undeniable proof. The moment carried Peggy to a new stage, an international conference in the airport's VIP wing, a place she once mopped in silence. She stood at a podium facing journalists and American officials, her navy blazer a stark contrast to her old apron. The room buzzed with anticipation, but whispers of doubt lingered, some attendees eyeing her with the same suspicion Brigitte had shown. Peggy took a breath, then spoke, her voice flowing effortlessly into Arabic, then French, then Swahili. She corrected errors in the event's briefing materials, errors that could have strained diplomatic ties. "Language is trust," she said in English, her words clear and commanding. "Ignoring it buries talent and builds walls." The room erupted in applause, a standing ovation that drowned out the doubters. Brigitte, lurking in a corner, paled, her authority crumbling. Tina slipped out, her smugness gone. The applause wasn't just for Peggy's words, but for her defiance, her refusal to be erased. The officials nodded, impressed. The journalists scribbled furiously. Celeste's absence was conspicuous. Her influence had diminished. Peggy's eyes shone, not with triumph, but with certainty. She had turned prejudice into power. As she stepped down, a black staff member in the back clapped slowly, his nod a silent acknowledgement of her fight. The terminal, once a cage, now felt like a stage where her voice, long suppressed, had become unforgettable. If Peggy Nkosi's journey from an unseen barista to an unforgettable voice moved you, let her story inspire your own. Her resilience against adversity and her unwavering courage remind us that every voice matters, no matter how long it's been silenced. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. How did Peggy's fight resonate with you? Where are you listening from? Your reflections fuel our mission to tell stories of hidden strength. Subscribe to our channel to catch the next tale of triumph, and don't miss a moment of these powerful journeys. Thank you for joining us, for lending your time to a story that proves dignity always finds its way. Until next time, stay bold, stay kind, and never forget, your voice can change the world. We'll meet again soon with another story that lights the way.